Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Neil Markey. He's joining me from this extraordinary scene in Jamaica. For those watching, it's one hell of a backdrop full of tropical plants. He's the CEO and co-founder of Beckley Retreats, and we'll learn more about what's involved in those retreats as we get into it. He's a former captain in the US Army. He's worked for McKinsey. He's worked in finance, and now finds himself leading these retreats. So, Neil, a warm welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So, yeah, for those who've not heard the story of Beckley Retreats and not heard your story before, could you give us a short history of how you came to get interested in this work and be doing what you're doing now?
Sure. It's been a windy road. I'll try and give the wave tops. And then if you want, we can kind of zoom in. But I was studying math in my undergrad, and thinking I was going to go do cryptology at the intelligence agencies. I had a bit of a gift in math. And even I had no interest in organized religion, frankly, but if you come at it from a math or a physics perspective, something's there. And I was looking for it, and a lot of the physicists throughout time kind of saw it, but it was always a bit taboo. Anyway, September 11th happened, and that kind of changed everything. Long story short, I ended up in the service. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that the United States was at risk. I went to Iraq once, Afghanistan twice. The Afghanistan trips were with the Ranger Regiment, which is a small special operations unit. And that was really intense. I got out. I went to Columbia University for graduate school. And there was, by some measures, I was doing quite well. I was at a good school. I was getting job offers at good companies, but I was really struggling. Like the bottom kind of fell out. I had PTSD, and had tried a lot of different traditional approaches. Not a lot of luck. And the first thing that I found that really helped was meditation. And I found a man that really took me under his wing and taught me meditation. And so for a few years, I kind of got back into studying about spirituality, investigating my own mental health, practicing meditation, experimented with some plants along the way. This was like 10 years ago, and got to this place where I was doing pretty well. I finished school. I ended up doing a teacher's certification in meditation. I was teaching meditation, and I had all of the right things. I had good community. I was back home with my family. I was working on a small business and teaching meditation. My brother. I had a good meditation practice. I was in nature a lot. And then all of a sudden you kind of sync up and life is a bit more smooth. It's not as anxious. It's not as stressful. And I had been deferring this job offer with McKinsey and Company. And I asked them for another deferral. And basically they said, no, we're not going to be your permanent backup plan. And so I ended up going there. Lots of ups and downs. Part of me loved it. But, the reality is the environment wasn't right for me. And over the course of a few years there, and then at another organization where I was doing, I would say, even more misaligned work, I ended up in a bad place again. Similar symptoms to when I came out of the service, but from stressful corporate misaligned work environments. And I'm looking around at a lot of my peers who are, quite fortunate, grew up, with tons of opportunities, and a lot of them are pretty miserable, not sleeping, using alcohol, using prescription drugs, troubled relationships. And they're not war veterans. They're just like in this system that's a bit broken. And so a few years ago, I left. I was by some measures, I was doing really well. I was in my mid 30s and was like a very senior executive for a private equity portfolio company, and completely, utterly miserable. And so I left. I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I just got back to meditation. I had been well before. Getting back to meditation, I ended up in Mexico teaching, and then started incorporating plants, mostly psilocybin and mushrooms, into that practice. And then friends started coming down, friends of friends. And then I got connected with the Beckley Foundation, which I'd love to tell you more about. And now we're doing these programs together in Jamaica, in the Netherlands. And I think it's my life's work. I love it. It's fascinating. It helps people. The world's ready for it. It's really inspirational.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. So I suppose what's most interesting to me is the plant experiences. I've done a lot of meditation. I found great benefit from that. I've also done a lot of deep therapeutic work, and I've received a great deal of benefit from that. I've never experimented with plants and what a difference that could make above and beyond what I'm experiencing with these other problems. So I'd love you to take me back to your first plant experience, and how you found that, and what were the effects afterwards, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you look at a lot of different kind of indigenous traditions where they've used these plants, it was with meditation, and so to me, the plants enhance meditative self-awareness practices, and what they really do is they kind of open things up. They open up potentiality, but it's best to do that in some foundation of presence practice or awareness practice. And I mean, so my first one was around eight years ago, and it was a mid dose of psilocybin mushrooms, and I laid on a bed and had a blindfold on, like is traditional, just by myself with a facilitator, and you listen to music for 5 to 6 hours. And I mean, it really is hard to explain because it's unlike anything else, but your consciousness shifts around. You kind of, you'll go through different periods of your own history. Things will become like quite clear to you. Sometimes it can be a bit challenging. Sometimes you can feel just unbelievably filled with joy. So it's a real like roller coaster. But through that, for a lot of people, it's this opening. It's this new perception on how they see their life. And that's how it was for me. It's like you're able to kind of zoom out. A lot of times we just get we get a bit overly focused on kind of what's in front of us, and we miss the forest for the trees. And what I mean by that is, just by you and I being on this call today, and having the ability to do that, we're in the top percentage of people that have ever walked the earth, really, you know what I mean, in terms of access to opportunity and wealth. And a lot of us are walking around quite miserable, and quite unhappy, quite unfulfilled. And it's not because we don't have enough, things. It's a mindset, right? It's a perspective thing. And it really does allow this kind of like stop, pause, zoom out kind of, and then you can see things a bit more clearly, more objectively.
Right. And if I'm right in saying, was this when you were studying, right? You'd come out of the forces by this point. You're at Columbia.
Yeah. This was in grad school. Yeah.
In grad school. And you start to get this new perspective after the experience. And then what's next? What changes afterwards?
Well, I had already been meditating for some time. And for me, that experience, I saw where meditation could go. But meditation, a lot of times, first, people do it for an entire life, and you talk to someone that's been doing it for 40 years, they're still making progress. But there is some, belief, there's some consistent thought out there that with the use of psychedelics, you can kind of accelerate that timeline. You can the opening that comes through meditation can come more quickly. And so what it did for me was it really solidified the benefits, or like my discipline around sitting and meditating. And it allowed me to just, I don't know if you're familiar with this book that's been out in the last couple of years called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
It's fascinating, right? It's so fascinating. It's like this trauma that happens to us. It's actually like in our tissues. It's in our central nervous system, right? It's not just in the mind. It's kind of in us. And we don't understand the mechanics. We just don't. But what it looks like is these plants have some way of getting into the body, and they bring these things, they bring these traumatic events, they bring this central nervous system response up to the surface, and then you can do something with it, So for me, over the years and working with plants, it's it's never been like a one and done, but each time, and with practice, things get lighter. I can reflect back now on things that have happened to me, and I can sense in my body that it's not as triggering, and it's not like I don't have any less respect for those experiences, but it's not weighing me down. It's not like seeping up through my subconscious as much anymore. It's kind of been let pass.
So would you describe that as a form of trauma release then? Somehow the cells are giving up some of these holding patterns?
Yes, something. But the reality is we don't know. We don't understand the mechanics. But yes, that is a common sentiment, is that people just describe like they were able to just like release memory, release something in the body, And it is it's all related. But many of us are walking around in some stage of fight or flight, that central nervous response, because we're just so overstimulated, and we're, so from when we wake up in the morning, most of us are in this mode that's a little bit more hyper reactive. It's a little bit more, for some of us, a lot of bit more anxious, right? And that's all in the body. That's, and that affects the mind, and then how we react with others. And these compounds and practices have some way of getting that to kind of settle and just be more peaceful.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating, and does resonate with my own trauma, what I would describe as trauma release work, where I'm doing the therapy and allowing memories to come up and allowing myself to have the feelings and the grief work.
Yeah,
I think it resonates very much. But obviously, I'm not doing it in the context of a psychedelic experience. But yeah,
well, and all the research. I mean, I think that there's some clarity that's important here. It's all the research that shows benefit with treatment-resistant depression and PTSD, that's all for psychedelic-assisted therapy. So the therapy being the key word. The psychedelic is an incredibly powerful tool, but it needs to be used in the right way, with the right support, right intention. So it's not, these aren't magic pills that you can just pop and they'll fix you. But with your effort and with your kind of intent, and with some help, some people kind of help and guide, then they can be incredibly transformative.
Right. And so you're into this meditative practice. You're doing some of the plants, and then the McKinsey opportunity comes along. And so I'm curious, what do you think had you take that path after having had this big opening that sort of led you not all the way back, but some way back down in a similar direction?
Yeah. So, I mean, I finished grad school. I had accepted this offer with McKinsey while I was in school, and then was having all these experiences when I was learning. And then I did a teacher certification in meditation at Jefferson University. I was super passionate about that. And then I was starting to teach it. And I was also working on a small business with my brother back in my hometown. And so why did I end up saying yes to McKinsey? I think the curiosity I had to see behind the curtain. The business world puts it on this pedestal, and I'm, lower middle class kid from Frederick, Maryland, and have an opportunity to work at this really prestigious organization, and I kind of couldn't help myself. I didn't know what was going to happen, and not that it was all bad. I mean, there's some amazingly incredible people there, and some really bright people, and part of me loved it because I love thinking about hard things, and it was quite an experience to oftentimes be like be in a group of 6 and be like, okay, I'm the slowest one in this group by far, but that's how you get better. That's how you learn, that's how you sharpen, is you're around people that can run circles around you. But, I think that's why it's important for folks to do the internal work enough to know like what they really want and what's going to fill them up. And for most people, I don't think anyone, but it's this material path. It's this prestigious path is like, you need to really be cautious about that. That's a dangerous one. So be eyes wide open. And I had never, it was a new environment for me that I hadn't figured out yet. Right.
And were you able to continue with the meditation practice whilst working for McKinsey?
Well, it was this such irony. I got to co-lead this small but growing internal mindfulness program with a really dear friend of mine. So at the beginning, yes, but the stress of the work and the kind of like misalignment, some of my bad habits started creeping in, and then my meditation went away. It's like I wasn't firm enough in my kind. Like I think I could actually go back now, and not that I would, but I think I could go back and like stay in resonance or stay settled or kind of like be strong enough. But I just wasn't quite strong enough yet. I got pulled, and then the stress and the demands of the work and the pace. I mean, it is fast paced. And so over the course of a few years there, my meditation practice went away along with a lot of my exercise. And then, I mean, the whole thing just kind of unravels, and there's not a lot of, it's the nature of the environment there. It's really challenging.
Yeah. I think that was my experience. I didn't work for McKinsey, but I worked for Deloitte, right? Similar pace, right? And it was a rare individual who stayed grounded, right? And there were a few.
Yeah, there are a few
who were boundaried enough and were able to say no to the weekend work and all the rest. And in fact, I knew a McKinsey partner who pretty much, he told me, look, I was a partner at McKinsey. I never worked a weekend, right? So some of those individuals somehow exist.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's a really rare breed, right?
It's a really rare breed. And I mean, it's just these, everyone there is kind of a bit of an overachiever, I would say. And then you're around a bunch of overachievers. And so it's just like to be able to be confident enough in yourself and not try and like outcompete all of these other people takes a high level of self-awareness. And I just like I wasn't there yet. And I was like, I had a bit of a soldier mentality. It's just like, you just push, you just go as hard as you can because that's the mode, but trying to live differently now. And the big thing too is I think this like resonance with work is really important, but we don't take the time to consider it. It's like, what's the organization that I'm investing my time in actually doing in the world? And if you're not emotionally and like spiritually and on board with that, even if you're not thinking about it on a daily basis, your body knows. Like your subconscious is well aware that you're out of sync with your values and who you are. So if you're square peg round hole, you're going to get all this, all these symptoms, all this stress, all that is the body trying to tell you, hey man, you got to make some different choices here. And so I hope that McKinsey can change over the years and become a better example of what I believe, for-profit companies can be in the world. But, right now they make Fortune 200, Fortune 400 companies bigger and more efficient, a lot of times at the expense of workers. And I don't think that's what I want to spend my time doing. And, and I also, this whole increased shareholder value that's the only metric. Like, it's just, they're exacerbating a lot of the problems that we see in the world. So I just can't get on board with that. I want to do something different.
Yeah, we're at an interesting phase, aren't we? Because I mean, that's an example, I think, of some sort of creeping awareness within corporate circles, or perhaps in the sort of capitalist mindset in general, that we need to start doing things differently. And mindfulness programs are just one example of things starting to shift. But it feels like there's an awful long way to go.
Yeah. And there's been times where I was like, the whole thing needs to break and be rebuilt from scratch. But I actually think that there's a shift that's happening that's quite positive, and more people are asking these questions. And, I mean, we could go off on a whole tangent around Western democratic capitalism and big business. But the resources have gotten too far away from the people in the communities, you know what I mean? Right. And there is a regenerative approach to for-profit business that's like this middle path that I think some people are figuring out, and more people are saying, yes, we need that. And these big, huge multinational conglomerates where the investors have no idea, nor do they care what's happening over here with these people. It's like that's just got to break. Business needs to be more local, and needs to have more heart. It's just become these generators of cash. We've got to change the way we think about that.
Yeah. And that shit. I mean, there's a lot in what you're saying there, but one aspect that jumps out is what Neil, what is your vision for the future of capitalism? But
we're working on that. I mean, I hope that we can bring more and more people that have, we're open. I want everyone to come through, have an opportunity to do these programs. We're also doing programs that are a bit more tailored for executive leaders, right? And people that have incredible capability and networks and positions of power and resource. And it's like, well, show them, let them have these kind of transformative experiences, understand that interconnectedness of everything. It's not a rational thinking exercise. It's felt, you're like, okay, we're all in this together, whether we want to be or not. There's like a bit of a humbling that happens in this work, and then show people some new models for how to think about businesses and relationships and how companies operate in their environments and things, and start, getting more people to just think less about quarterly earnings and what's the real impact of this organization more broadly, thinking, zooming out, right? That's what this work can help you do. Zoom out, get away from me or this, and we really start thinking about the whole collective and more universally.
Something that's coming through. And is that well, let me ask the question differently. What do you see as being the most frequent shifts in people's perspectives coming through your programs?
Yeah. Well, I would say people come down. So like our programs, they're non-medical, right? So we screen out really severe indications, not because I don't think we can't help people that have severe indications. It actually looks like these plants are great for that. But it's just our approach. We're doing larger groups, and folks that have severe indications just need a different level of care and infrastructure. So the folks that are coming down usually fit in 3-ish buckets. They'll say something like, I just feel stuck. I'm just like in this autopilot mode, and I've tried like this thing there, and I've tried this thing, but nothing's stuck. And I'm just like, I just feel stuck, and I mean, I know that feeling. And I think that this work, this kind of getting away from everything and having these powerful experiences can be really powerful, and just like providing an opportunity to make shift, and then a lot of our guests will come down and say something. They'll have something recent, like a death of a loved one, or they lost their job, and they just like there's kind of a traumatic event, and they want to just like get through it, like not forget about it, but just not have it weigh them down anymore. Like move on, give it pay it the respect it deserves, and move on. And so I think this work can really help with that. And then we have folks that come down and they have like a meditation practice or a spiritual practice. And this is just like the next step. And it's kind of a very light opening journey. They're like, I want to become more empathetic, more creative, sit in awe more, and this work can kind of help with those openings. But I mean, we just had an 80-year-old woman and an 86-year-old man come down for the woman's 80th birthday. Never done something like this before. And, he was in finance. They had lived a very fortunate life, like these weren't people that had a sheltered existence. And they said it was the most meaningful experience of their life. So you feel this, you experience this thing that's in you, that's in other humans, that's in nature, that physicists and mathematicians and biologists and chemists have been seeing for millennia, or for as long as we've been looking, but haven't been able to like talk about in the right words or whatever, because it's like so taboo. And then that can be fundamentally life-changing. You know what I mean? There's a lot of use of, or not a lot, but there's more and more use of psilocybin for like palliative care. There's so much anxiety at the end of life.
You're right.
And looks like you can give people, 1-2 of these types of sessions in the right way. And that anxiety completely goes away. I mean, like how amazing is that?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm starting to get a picture. I couldn't help smile to myself as you were describing the 86-year-old and the 80-year-old. Come on, dear. Should we go to Jamaica and take a trip?
Yeah.
Just love that.
Well,
I love that conversation over a cup of tea when they're considering what to do for her birthday.
Well, we have a lot of times people come down with their significant other, or there's a son mother couple down here now, and it can be really transformative in those close relationships, because over time, that our projection, our perspective of that person becomes a function of these like deeply ingrained kind of mental and emotional patterns, right? So we're not seeing over some time, we're not seeing like a really objective view of that person. We're seeing that person with 20 years of our personal history and memory of that person, right?
Yeah.
Which is and what this work can do is it can kind of it can release some of those things, and then you can kind of have this new. It's almost like you have this new opportunity to kind of shift the relationship in a better path. You know what I mean? So it's it can be really where, if you went to talk therapy, you can make kind of similar progress, but again, talk therapy, it's kind of getting in the mind, right? When a lot of this stuff is like, it's actually deeper in us. You know what I mean? It's when you're with someone, your central nervous system's actually making responses. It's not just your rational mind, so it's like, how do you get at all of that being? There's different approaches.
Yeah, that's right. I think I've been fortunate in the therapy I've done has been very much embodied, right? I think that's where I think that's the best therapy is embodied. It may start talking, but it needs to get into the body at some point. I'm still curious about the public perception of psilocybin and psychedelics and so on. And I mean, what comes to mind is recently there's a Gabor Mate, right? I'm not sure you're familiar with him.
Sure, of course.
And he interviewed Prince Harry, so there was a lot in the press about this. And he was referred to in one of the newspapers, the controversial Dr. Gabor Mate, who advocates using ayahuasca. And there's still the mainstream view, well, at least according to this newspaper, is that somehow it's controversial or it's dangerous and it's so on. And we see stories of people taking bad trips and so on. Like, what's your take on where public consciousness is right now on these topics?
I think it's heading in a good direction, positive direction. And by positive, I mean more openness. I think it's changed drastically in the last 18 months. I mean, in a big way. I think that Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, the Netflix series, Prince Harry, there's kind of these national news stories of use. And then, my father's friends are in their 80s, generally lead more conservative. And they're curious about potentially coming down on programs now, which I think a few years ago would have been like completely nuts. But there's risk here, but I just don't think we're doing a good job of looking at like risk versus reward, or relative risk, there's risk in pharmaceutical drugs. I mean, my God, look at like what we go and get prescribed from the doctor's office. It's nuts. It's nuts. I mean, I care a lot about veteran health. We're doing a lot of work with veteran health, and it's not uncommon for me to hear about a veteran that's getting treatment from the Veteran Affairs where they're on 20 or 25 different medications. It's like, well, what's the risk in that? Like, come on, people, this is criminal. It's criminal. And so I think if you actually look at psilocybin and you look at the relative risk, and you look at the cost versus potential benefit or risk versus potential benefit, it's like a no-brainer. It's, come on, people. It's and it needs to be used in the right way. And so for some people it can exacerbate problems, but like net, if relative to other drugs, relative to the transformative potential, we need to open up a bit more to it. This is a kind of funny story. I mean, I'm a bit of a like math geek. I love data. And when I was in graduate school, I read an article in an Economist, and it was something like getting high or something, but it had a graph in there, and it racked and stacked kind of most of the known drugs in the world. And it was done by David Nutt, who was the drug czar.
Yeah, drug czar, yeah.
And in 2010. And they went around and looked at a bunch of different compounds, and they tried to say, okay, well, let's just look at the harm. Let's try and measure just harm. And so they developed this metric, and they said there's harm to self, which is propensity for addiction, toxicity to the body, like how bad is it to me? And then there's harm to others, which is, domestic abuse and, people losing their jobs. And they came up with this metric, and then they went out and they looked at a bunch of different data sets. And you know what the number one most dangerous drug was in terms of, by far. And so we use that all. It's like, it's the one compound that you need an excuse not to use. Right. And then we're scared to death of psilocybin. It's like, it's just not rational, so it's just going to take some time. In that same list, it was at the absolute bottom. The last
psilocybin.
One. Psilocybin.
Right.
Yeah. Psilocybin. And so what the kind of neat little nugget was, I was like very struck by this at the time, because I was experimenting and was like, oh man, are we actually looking at the data here? And then I found out 7 or 8 years later that it was actually Amanda Fielding, who's the, founder, executive director of the Beckley Foundation, who was the architect of that study and got that study published. And then if you look back at the history, though, it was so taboo then that David essentially got pushed out.
Right.
It was such, right. So, but I think the tides of, I think we're kind of past that point where we're getting more openness and acceptance. And it's just I think everybody's looking at the alternative, which is the established Western medical system. And they're like, well, okay, well, that for mental health and well-being, I mean, like, that's not working.
Yeah.
So, like, that's completely broken. So, it's almost out of necessity. People are opening up.
And I wonder, I mean, if there'll be some kind of positive feedback loop, right? Because you could say, well, yes, the Western medical system isn't working, but why is there so much pressure on it? What are the lives that we're leading that means so many people are turning to antidepressants and so on? Like, what is it
100%.
about how we lead our life, right? But if we can have more opening, and people seeing new possibilities, through doing type of work that you advocating or other forms of therapeutic modalities and so on, can they now view work, they could take a different approach to how they lead their lives and then not need so much medical intervention?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, for me, a big part of it is just, it's this myth of materialism, and that, more and more stuff is going to fill us up. And then we've created these economies where for the working class, it's really hard to get by, so for white collar professionals, we get into this loop. I always describe it as kind of eating a sugar diet. It's like, it'll give you a little bit of a boost, but there's no like actual nourishment in it. So it just leaves you more hungry than you were before. And so we have so many people out there, I think, are eating like a life of, material things, eating sugar, when really what they need is community and, these spiritual connection and these like deeper practices, time in nature, things that actually like will fill them up and make them feel complete, instead of this endless cycle of trying to do that with more stuff,
Yeah. That resonates particularly. I've just come back from I've got 2 6-year-old boys, and we've just been on a 3-night camping and canoeing trip, like in the forest. And you come back and I feel so full up, right? And the whole trip cost me like $50, right? Yeah. Like we stopped for a sausage roll in the cafe on one of the days. Yeah. It's amazing what time, just out in nature can do. It's and out near the water.
Yeah. And I love coming at it from a physics perspective. we're part of nature. If you look at the cross section of a lung and then look at a tree, it's like, and then they actually do the reciprocal function. So it's like we need nature, you know, and I think we need to start thinking about nature like we think about, you know, access to food and water. But we've, in this really ironic way, we've kind of destroyed nature to make us more material things that just don't have that same kind of energetic feedback loop. They're devoid of this thing or whatever that's in nature, that's in us. And we need more of that. We need less, you know, fancy houses and fancy cars and stuff. And we just need more connection with this thing that is in nature and that we're also a part of. We need more communion with it, you know?
Given you like data, have you seen any of the work that the Japanese have done on forest bathing?
Yes. Yeah.
So lots of great. In fact, we had a forest bathing instructor on the show.
Yeah. Well, and that's why for us, this work, you know, is there benefit of using some psilocybin in a clinic environment? Yes. Let's do more of that. Again, relative to other options, particularly if it's with a good therapist, all thumbs up. But there's something different when you do this work deep in nature together, you know, and that's really important. Again, I think that psilocybin, psychedelics, that whatever's happening in nature bathing, this like loop, this energetic loop that's happening, there's an exchange between nature, us and nature. I think that if you use the right amount of psychedelics, it opens that up. Same with like meditation. And so they're all kind of pointing at a similar thing. They're helping this relational thing with ourselves and nature.
Yeah, just speaking to you is really, I can feel my own mind expanding it, because when I can see, because I meditate, I go to nature. Yeah, I very much see it as it's my experience. You know, this is my experience meditating. I feel calmer, or I might feel in awe. I'm not relating to it relationally, if that's not tautologist, right? I'm not thinking about me connecting and a back and forth between the environment in the way that you're describing it. I can see there's something here you're pointing to that I'm, you know, I could get more familiar with.
Yeah. And it's beyond mind, but with some cues, try it, you know, sit in nature. I mean, we're, you know, we're all part of it. You know, there's lots of, again, we don't understand the mechanics of it, but like we pick up on each other's central nervous systems in a big way, you know? And so, so much of our existence, it is relational. It's how we're interacting with others. It's even our own kind of like perception of self, right? Is a relational loop. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you do the ceremonies in your retreat, that's communal. So everybody is taking the plant at the same time. And
that's right. And this is how, you know, what we're trying to do is bring the best of, or bring, you know, insights and way from Western science and from more kind of indigenous tradition. Because from our perspective, they're not, they actually reinforce each other. But again, like the science probably just hasn't caught up to some of these things, you know, like the science can't describe some of these really ineffable, indescribable things. But so, we do them in groups. So typically we'll have a group of 15 to 20 guests, and we'll have 6 to 7 facilitators with a nurse and with some kind of host staff. So it's usually like 2 guests to 1 kind of Beckley personnel. And
Right.
again, I think there's value in one-on-one work, but there's something that is special and unique about doing this with other people.
Right.
Yeah, in a big way.
And you're doing it in a forest, or what's the setting?
We are on this, well, we have a property here in Jamaica and a property in the Netherlands. And when we look for properties, we just want something that's away,
Yeah.
So it's deep in nature. It's surrounded by nature.
Okay.
And that's the important thing. I think it's good to, just be surrounded by nature. You don't want like a lot of noise. You don't want a lot of, again, we don't understand it all, but I'd rather not have a lot of stray electromagnetic kind of frequency and right, just like get away from the developed world and just kind of be in nature. Yeah. And everyone, go ahead.
Go on. No, go on. Say.
Well, I was just gonna, because sometimes I forget. It's like these ceremonies become like I love them, and I just witness them all the time now, and I forget that it is probably quite foreign to a lot of people. And you don't have to call them a ceremony if you don't want. You can call it a session if it feels weird. But the reality is we make it special. So there's some ritual to it. There's some intention, because mindset matters. Intentionality matters.
Yeah.
So you see this in medicine, right? Doctor bedside manner, placebo effect. So, we try and get the mind and the body, like actually through the entire kind of preparatory program and all of the stuff we do around it, we try and get people ready, and there's a mindset component. So we do some kind of ritual traditions that we pull from different lineages, and some of the stuff, it's just good mindfulness practice. Just be here now,
Right. Yeah.
Same things you do in meditation, just be in the present moment, cultivate gratitude. And then, we make a tea. So everyone kind of gets their own dose, which is a function of, they have a discussion with the senior facilitators. Some people go a little bit lower, some people go a bit higher. And then everybody takes the tea together. And a lot of times we'll start in silence. And so everybody has like their own mat. They have a blindfold, you lay back, and you just try and meditate and be present. And then the psilocybin will come on, and the group will play live music. So it's like really beautifully facilitated. It's like these it's not like a sterile, medical office, in an office building. It's like, it's really beautiful. And I think that's part of it too, right? It's how people feel. And it usually, it kind of peaks in 2 to 3 hours, and then people will start kind of coming down over at 5 hours or so. And and on our team, we always have our teams of 6 or 7, and so we kind of build them around what we call senior facilitators, and we look for one senior facilitator that has a Western background, so psychotherapy or integrative health kind of background. And then we look for another senior facilitator that has, usually a decade or more of this more indigenous approach, and we try and pair them together.
Yeah.
And then we fill in around with, meditation instructors, sitters, people that have been in this world for a long time, and their job is just to like keep a nice chill energy, play music, and it's fascinating to watch. It's really cool.
And do you get extreme reactions and sort of people vomiting? Does that happen? Is that something to deal with? Well,
yeah, it gets not as nothing like ayahuasca,
right?
Where kind of that norm is people getting very upset, sick and purging. Sometimes people will get some nausea, but generally people, it's like well tolerated. That's part of the reason that we like psilocybin. We think can kind of have these really powerful experiences, but it's not as tough on the body. It's not as much of a struggle. Like I'm like, if you can give people an experience and they're not like also throwing up on their buddy, I'm like, I will take that. Not that there's anything, if people want to try ayahuasca, I encourage it. But the psilocybin experience, I guess the known outcomes are a little bit like tighter. It's a little bit more controlled. But sometimes people have really, extreme processes. Sometimes people have some deep stuff that comes up and they work through. And so that's why it's good to have a team. You got to have a big enough team, because sometimes, a person, it's like best to kind of take that person and let them get a bit of a break away from the group and like kind of let them go through it. And sometimes folks will get into this loop where they feel like they're disturbing the group, and then they feel bad. And so we just have to have a team and a plan to be able to kind of know that these types of things happen. But
yeah, interesting. And it's you're presumably you're pretty pioneering. You're learning some of these lessons. Mm-hmm. There's not that many of you guys out there, right? Presumably, organizations like yours.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like underground. There's a lot of amazing kind of healers that have been doing this kind of in their own way for a long time. But no, I don't think there's a lot of organizations like us that are kind of bringing. I hope we're bringing like the right level of professionalism. So we have like standards. So we have checklists and protocols, and we know where the psilocybin comes from, and like all that stuff. Because what we want to do is create a safe experience and have some consistency around it, but also not over mechanize it, not over clinicalize it to where it becomes, again, just another Western approach. There is some artistry, there's some beauty in it. So it's like we want to create, good, firm guardrails so that we give people a safe experience, but allow some of this flow in the program. And and I don't think there's, the way that we're kind of tracking data and getting and getting feedback and then putting it back in and being iterative and thinking about our program. I mean, you can get really sophisticated. I'd say we have an excellent program now, but it can get even better if you say, how do we really help people make lasting change? And not just give them a mystical experience, but really help them make lifelong change. If you look at, adult learning or habit change science, you can get really sophisticated in how you deliver material, right? Or how many times you touch people along this journey to help them, develop a meditation habit, you know what I mean? To help them, actually start getting in nature more frequently on their own. So I think that we're kind of bringing a new level of thoughtfulness to like these compounds and how to use them.
Yeah. And I noticed that when I looked at the program, you've got these big sections like before and after, right? Where you're really thinking about bringing
that's
it
kind of novel.
Lives.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what we want. We want habit change. So it's really using psychedelics as a tool to help people, make shifts in their life. And there's lots of places right now where, you can go in some places. I mean, you can go for a night. I've seen this so much all over the place, but you can go and have this really transformative, mystical experience, but there's no preparation. There's no kind of like mindset, mind-body alignment prior to it. And then there's no follow-up. So at best, it's like very suboptimal. You're just not getting as much out of it. You're not using it in a way that is going to be of most benefit to you. You're like leaving a lot on the table. And at worst, it's dangerous. If you're already having, some mental health challenges, and then you go, to me, psychedelics, they open up potentiality, right? But if you're already struggling and then you go do something in a kind of mindless way, it can make things worse. It can destabilize. It can exacerbate things. So, it's important to, consider a lot of things when experimenting with these compounds.
And making it safe. I mean, there was a story in the paper yesterday, which a friend of mine said a bunch of guys took magic mushrooms in the Lake District, which is a hilly part in the UK, and they all got lost. Had to be rescued, right? That's sort of common right now. Is these sort of funny stories about people getting high, and you would bring a very different message.
Yeah. Well, I think it's fun. Amanda Fielding has two sons, Rock and Cosmo, which are names you would expect from a woman that's been studying psychedelics for decades. And Cosmo always says, psychedelics can be fun. And I think that's true, what I mean? It's just like, what's the intention and like, what's the dose? Mm-hmm. And so can a group of people use some mushrooms and go to a concert or go have a hike? Yeah, it's probably net safer than a bunch of buddies going and having bars in a city or having drinks in a bar in a city. What I mean? It's probably safer than that. But the way, what we're doing is trying to get people to have kind of transformation, to have like real shifts.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know you've got another engagement, so we could have got on forever, Neil. But thank you so much. I really feel like I've had a window into your world, and I especially love the way you're bringing into this concept of connection and relationship to all that is, right? I really appreciated that in the conversation. We will put a link to Beckley Retreats into the show notes for people who are intrigued and want to learn more. It's a fantastic website. All the information there. Anything else where you'd point people who resonate with this and want to learn more?
Well, yeah, Beckley Retreats is a good spot. We do bi-weekly calls where people can kind of join and ask questions. And I mean, the Beckley Foundation, that's kind of where the retreat's name comes from, is from the foundation. You can check out the research there. It's really exciting. The research is emerging, but it's certainly pointing towards, hey, we should look at this. We should at least consider this. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Neil. I've really appreciated the conversation. Thank you.